Number 10. Seeking distraction instead of enjoyment. Most people don't chase happiness anymore. They chase the moment when discomfort finally shuts up. And that's where the addiction begins. You open an app, not because you're curious, excited, or inspired, but because something inside you feels tight, restless, unfinished. Distraction becomes the fastest anesthetic. It doesn't add joy to your life. It simply removes the feeling that something is missing. And your brain learns this pattern frighteningly fast. Enjoyment requires presence. It asks you to stay with an experience long enough for meaning to form. Distraction asks for nothing. It doesn't care who you are or what you feel. It only promises relief. When tension appears, the brain remembers. I don't need to understand this feeling, I just need to mute it. Over time, enjoyment feels slow and effortful, while distraction feels efficient and safe. This is why people say they're bored even while consuming non-stop content. Their senses are busy, but their mind is untouched. Distraction doesn't nourish the brain. It interrupts it. It keeps you hovering just above discomfort without ever landing in satisfaction. You're not choosing pleasure, you're choosing escape dressed as entertainment. The danger isn't that distraction feels good. The danger is that it teaches your nervous system that joy is optional, but relief is necessary. Slowly, your standards shift. You stop asking, "Did I like this?" and start asking, "Did this make the feeling go away?" That's when enjoyment loses its voice. And the quiet tragedy is this: the brain that survives on distraction forgets how to be delighted. Not because delight disappeared, but because it requires staying, and you've trained yourself to leave. Number 9. Using scrolling to escape tension. Scrolling doesn't start with boredom. It starts with pressure, a small, sharp feeling in the chest, a sense that something is unresolved. The brain doesn't name it as tension. It experiences it as threat. And scrolling offers a simple deal. You don't have to solve the feeling. You just have to outrun it. One swipe is enough to interrupt the signal. Another swipe keeps it away. The feed is not designed to entertain you deeply. It's designed to keep your nervous system suspended. Each new image, clip, or headline resets your emotional state just enough to prevent collapse, but never enough to create fulfillment. Your brain stays alert, distracted, and slightly soothed, like pacing in a waiting room that never calls your name. What makes scrolling addictive isn't pleasure. It's the way it dissolves tension without asking questions. You don't need clarity. You don't need resolution. You just need motion. The brain begins to associate stillness with discomfort and movement with safety. Silence becomes loud. Pauses feel dangerous, so you scroll, not to find something, but to avoid feeling something. Over time, tension loses its original meaning. It was once a signal: pay attention, adjust, act. Now it's treated like an error that must be erased immediately. The brain stops using tension as guidance and starts using it as a trigger for escape. Growth stalls quietly here, not dramatically. The cruel irony is that scrolling never removes the tension. It only postpones it. The moment you stop, the feeling returns, often stronger. So the brain doubles down. Scroll faster, scroll longer, stay numb. And slowly, without realizing it, you teach yourself a dangerous rule. Discomfort is not something to understand. It is something to flee. Number 8. Choosing numbness over satisfaction. Satisfaction is not loud. It doesn't spike. It settles. And that's exactly why the modern brain avoids it. Satisfaction requires you to stay with one feeling long enough for it to deepen, and depth can feel unsettling when you're used to quick relief. Numbness, on the other hand, is immediate. It flattens everything: pain, desire, expectation, into something manageable. Not good, just quiet. The brain learns early that satisfaction comes with conditions. You have to care. You have to invest effort. You have to risk disappointment. Numbness asks for none of that. It promises neutrality. No highs, but no lows either. And when life already feels heavy, neutrality can feel like mercy. So people stop chasing what fulfills them and start choosing what dulls them. They don't ask, "Did this make my life richer?" They ask, "Did this stop the feeling?" Music becomes background noise. Food becomes distraction. Conversations become fillers. The goal is no longer to feel good, it's to feel less. Neurologically, this is a trade. Satisfaction strengthens emotional pathways. Numbness weakens them. The more often you choose numbness, the harder it becomes to access fulfillment later. Not because it's gone, but because your brain has stopped practicing it. The most dangerous part is how invisible this shift is. You don't feel miserable, you just feel muted. Days pass without friction, but also without resonance. Nothing hurts deeply, but nothing lands either. Life becomes tolerable instead of meaningful. And one day, you realize the problem was never that joy was unavailable. It's that you trained yourself to prefer the absence of feeling over the risk of truly being satisfied. Number 7. Ending stress instead of building joy. Most decisions people make aren't aimed at creating happiness. They're aimed at stopping pressure. The brain becomes obsessed with subtraction. Remove stress, remove conflict, remove urgency. Relief feels like progress because something unpleasant disappears. But joy doesn't work that way. Joy is additive. It requires intention, energy, and time. Things a stressed brain feels it cannot afford. Stress is treated like an enemy to be eliminated, not a signal to be transformed. So choices become smaller, safer. You pick what ends the tension fastest, not what expands your life. You cancel plans instead of shaping them into something meaningful. You avoid challenges instead of redesigning them into growth. The brain learns a simple rule: less strain equals success. But here's the quiet cost. Ending stress only brings you back to zero. It never moves you forward. You feel calm for a moment, but empty shortly after. Joy, on the other hand, often begins with effort, uncertainty, even discomfort. It asks you to tolerate tension long enough for something valuable to form. A brain addicted to relief refuses that delay. Neurologically, stress relief closes loops. Joy builds circuits. When you prioritize ending stress, your life becomes efficient but shallow, smooth but hollow. You survive the day, but nothing accumulates into meaning. You're constantly resetting instead of building. This is why people feel strangely unsatisfied even when their life becomes easier. They remove the noise, but they never added music. Peace without purpose feels sterile. Calm without creation feels blank. And eventually, the brain confuses the absence of stress with a good life, never realizing that joy was never meant to replace stress but to give it a reason. Number 6. Treating rest as avoidance. Rest was never meant to feel guilty, it was meant to restore. But when the brain becomes addicted to relief, rest quietly mutates into escape. You're no longer resting to regain strength. You're resting to avoid the friction of engagement. The body lies down, but the mind doesn't recover. It hides. True rest has a direction. It prepares you to return. Avoidance has none. It only delays. And the brain can feel the difference even if you don't consciously name it. That's why rest often leaves people feeling heavier instead of lighter. The nervous system wasn't replenished. It was paused. When rest becomes avoidance, effort starts to feel threatening. Any task that asks for focus, responsibility, or emotional presence triggers the same response: withdraw, delay, numb out. The brain reframes avoidance as self-care because self-care sounds kind and avoidance feels safe. But safety without engagement slowly erodes confidence. Neurologically, restorative rest lowers stress while preserving motivation. Avoidant rest lowers stress by shutting motivation down. That's the difference. One refuels the engine, the other disconnects it. Over time, the brain associates calm with disengagement and energy with danger. You begin to feel most at peace when nothing is expected of you. This is why long periods of passive rest, excess sleep, endless lounging, constant background stimulation can quietly increase anxiety instead of reducing it. The brain knows something is being postponed, and postponed effort doesn't disappear. It waits. Eventually, even meaningful desires start to feel exhausting before you touch them. Not because you're lazy, but because your nervous system learned that stepping back is relief and stepping forward is threat. Rest stops being a bridge back to life and becomes a hiding place from it. And the longer you stay hidden, the harder it feels to return. Not because you can't, but because you forgot that rest was supposed to lead somewhere. Number 5. Needing stimulation to feel okay. There was a time when feeling neutral was normal. Now, neutrality feels unbearable. The modern brain has learned to expect constant input: sound, visuals, notifications, motion. When stimulation drops, the nervous system doesn't relax. It panics. Silence feels like something is wrong. Stillness feels like emptiness. So the brain reaches not for joy, but for anything that can keep the internal noise from turning into awareness. This isn't craving excitement, it's craving regulation. Stimulation becomes emotional scaffolding. A podcast to fall asleep, music to shower, videos to eat. The brain stops trusting itself to hold a stable emotional state without external assistance. Feeling okay becomes something that must be supplied from outside. Neurologically, this rewires baseline tolerance. Dopamine stops signaling reward and starts signaling relief. The absence of stimulation creates discomfort, not because something bad is happening, but because the brain has lost its ability to self-soothe. Internal quiet feels like deprivation instead of rest. The cost shows up subtly. Focus weakens, patience shortens, deep enjoyment fades. Experiences that require sustained attention, reading, creating, listening, feel strangely tiring. Not because they're hard, but because they don't immediately regulate your nervous system the way stimulation does. You begin to mistake stimulation for aliveness, but stimulation only keeps you alert. It doesn't make you fulfilled. It fills space without building depth. And when stimulation becomes mandatory, meaning becomes optional. The most dangerous shift is this: your emotional state becomes dependent, not responsive. You're no longer moved by life, you're managed by inputs. Calm feels artificial. Peace feels unreachable without noise. And slowly, the brain forgets a vital truth. Being okay was never something you needed to download. It was something you once knew how to generate. Number 4. Avoiding effort that lacks instant relief. The brain doesn't avoid effort because it's lazy. It avoids effort because effort delays relief. And a brain addicted to relief measures every action by one question only. How fast will this make the discomfort stop? If the answer isn't immediately, motivation collapses before the action even begins. Effort used to be associated with progress. Now it's associated with prolonged tension. Anything that requires patience, learning, or uncertainty feels like emotional debt. The brain predicts future strain and opts out early. Why struggle through something meaningful when something numbing can make the pressure disappear right now? This is how long-term goals quietly lose their pull. Writing, exercising, building skills, repairing relationships, none of these offer instant relief. They often increase discomfort before they reduce it. So the relief-seeking brain labels them as inefficient, even when they're deeply rewarding over time. Neurologically, this creates a timing mismatch. Dopamine is no longer released for progress, it's released for interruption. The brain stops rewarding effort and starts rewarding escape. You don't feel proud after trying. You feel relieved after quitting, and relief masquerades as wisdom. I'm just protecting my peace. But peace without growth becomes stagnation. Avoided effort doesn't vanish. It accumulates as quiet dissatisfaction. You sense your potential, but approaching it feels exhausting before you start. Not because you're incapable, but because your brain has been trained to expect payoff before participation. This is why people say, I want it, but I can't bring myself to do it. Desire survives. Capacity remains. But tolerance for delayed relief disappears. And slowly, life shrinks to what feels easy instead of what feels meaningful. Not because meaning stopped calling, but because it stopped promising immediate comfort. Number 3. Consuming to calm, not to enjoy. Consumption used to be about taste, curiosity, and pleasure. Now it's about regulation. Food, media, purchases, even information are used less to enrich life and more to steady the nervous system. You don't consume because you want the experience. You consume because something inside you feels unsettled and you need it to stop. This is why enjoyment fades so quickly. The moment consumption fulfills its real purpose, calming the system, it loses relevance. You're halfway through a meal and already scrolling. You start a show and barely register it. The brain isn't savoring, it's stabilizing. The object is just a tool. Neurologically, this shifts the role of reward. Dopamine stops amplifying pleasure and starts dampening discomfort. Consumption becomes medicine, not celebration. And like any medicine taken without intention, the dosage increases while the effect shrinks. The tragedy is that calming consumption blocks deeper satisfaction. True enjoyment requires attention, anticipation, and emotional openness. Calming consumption numbs all three. You don't feel disappointed, but you also don't feel delighted. Everything tastes flatter, everything blends together. Over time, the brain forgets how to want things for the right reason. Desire becomes indistinct. You want something but not anything specific, so you consume more, faster, and emptier, chasing the feeling of being settled, not the joy of being engaged. This is why people say, nothing really hits anymore. It's not tolerance, it's misuse. Pleasure systems weren't built to anesthetize stress. When forced into that role, they dull themselves. And slowly, consumption stops being a doorway into experience and becomes a wall between you and it. Number 2. Replacing meaning with comfort. Meaning is demanding. It asks you to care about outcomes you can't fully control. It asks you to tolerate uncertainty, responsibility, and emotional exposure. Comfort asks for none of that. Comfort is predictable, soft, immediate. And to a brain addicted to relief, predictability feels safer than purpose. So meaning gets slowly traded away. Not in one dramatic decision, but in small daily choices. You choose what feels good now over what feels right long-term. You pick routines that soothe instead of paths that challenge. Life becomes organized around minimizing friction, not maximizing significance. The brain reframes this as maturity. I just want peace. I'm done chasing big things. But underneath, something subtle happens. You stop feeling necessary to your own life. Meaning creates tension because it implies responsibility. Comfort dissolves tension by asking nothing of you. Neurologically, meaning activates long-term motivation circuits. Comfort quiets them. The more you choose comfort, the less alive your goals feel. Not because they were unrealistic, but because your nervous system no longer tolerates the emotional weight of caring deeply. This is why comfort-heavy lives often feel strangely hollow. Everything is fine, but nothing matters. Days pass smoothly, yet leave no imprint. You're safe, but not moved. Relaxed, but not fulfilled. Meaning was never supposed to feel comfortable. It was supposed to feel worth it. And when comfort replaces meaning, the brain confuses ease with peace, never realizing that peace without purpose feels empty, not calm. Number 1. Confusing peace with absence of feeling. Peace was never meant to feel empty. But when the brain becomes addicted to relief, Emptiness starts to look like safety. Strong emotions, excitement, longing, passion, even sadness are treated as disturbances. The goal quietly shifts from feeling well to feeling nothing at all, and the absence of feeling gets mislabeled as peace. This happens slowly. You stop reacting deeply because reacting feels risky. Feelings demand attention. They pull you into action, choice, vulnerability. So the brain learns to flatten them. Not happiness, not pain, just neutrality, a calm surface with nothing moving underneath. Neurologically, this is emotional suppression disguised as regulation. True peace comes from integration, allowing emotions to rise and pass without being overwhelmed. Emotional absence comes from shutdown. The nervous system isn't calm. It's disengaged. It's conserving energy by not caring. This is why people say they feel fine, but disconnected. Nothing hurts sharply, but nothing excites either. Achievements don't land. Losses don't fully register. Life becomes distant, like watching yourself through glass. The brain believes it has solved suffering by muting the entire spectrum. But peace isn't numbness. Peace has texture. It includes warmth, clarity, groundedness. It allows feeling without panic. When feeling disappears completely, something vital goes with it. The sense of being alive inside your own experience. The cruel trick is that emotional absence feels stable at first. No waves, no storms, but also no movement. And without movement, there is no meaning. Real peace isn't the silence that comes from shutting down. It's the quiet that comes from not needing to run anymore. And until the brain relearns that difference, it will keep mistaking emptiness for freedom.